Join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
On Dan Wootton tonight, as the man found guilty of killing British student Meredith Kercher walks free, the woman at the heart of one of the most infamous murder trials of the millennium, Amanda Knox, sits down for an exclusive interview to talk moving on, motherhood, reclaiming her identity, and whether doubts about her innocence will ever truly disappear. Plus, Robert Jobson reflects on a big week of change and controversy for the royal family. And I'll break down the day's top stories with my superstar panel, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, and the journalist and author Amy Nagel. That's Dan Wootton tonight, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Monday to Thursday on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, Germany. Have you seen what's going on there? This is a country who you thought I don't know, they might think twice about creating a subclass in their society. No, today they've proudly declared a lockdown of their unvaccinated. And in addition, they're considering making the vaccine mandatory. Have they not learnt anything from their past? And protesters, just how much do you think they should be able to get away with? Priti Patel is pushing for them to have prison sentences of up to 6 months. Is she right? And Meghan Markle today won a legal challenge against the Mail on Sunday. And upon doing so, she described the tabloid media as a daily fail that will divide us. What do you reckon to that? Do you think tabloids cause more harm than good? And I also going to ask a random question tonight. Do you think that cyclists should pay road tax? We'll have all of that and more coming up. But first, there's been a new development on an awful story that many of us have been following. Our reporter, Balvinda Sidhu, is at Coventry Crown Court with all the details. Good evening to you, Balvinda.
Evening, Michelle. Yes, that's right. It's a case that is really disturbing and harrowing. It's the death of a young little boy called Arthur Labinjo-Hughes. It took a jury here at Coventry Crown Court just over 6 hours to convict his stepmother Emma Tustin of murder and his father Thomas Hughes of manslaughter. They were also both convicted of child cruelty offences, including physically abusing the little boy and isolating him for up to 14 hours a day. Emma Tustin was found guilty of poisoning him with salt and depriving him of food and water. They are now both due to be sentenced tomorrow. The jury also requested a 1-minute silence be held for Arthur Labinjo-Hughes after they announced their verdict, which is very unusual. I've not seen that happen before in court. Now, this is the story of a little boy who was tortured before he was eventually killed, and some viewers may find the following images very upsetting.
This CCTV shows 6-year-old Arthur Labinjo-Hughes in pain as he struggles to pull his duvet across the living room floor where he slept. Hours later, he died. In the days and weeks leading up to his death, Arthur was regularly punished. He was denied food and water. He was isolated for up to 14 hours a day. And he was beaten, so his tiny body was covered in bruises. It was a head injury that eventually killed him. The cruelty he suffered came at the hands of those who should have protected him, his father Thomas Hughes and his stepmother Emma Tustin. Following the verdict, Arthur's grandmother read out a tribute on behalf of his mother, Olivia Halcrow.
Arthur was the light of my life. He wasn't just my only child, he was my best friend. Never did I imagine he would have been taken from this world so early in his life. But if Arthur could ask for one final thing, it would be that he was remembered for his superpowers. That was what I will always remember for, his superpower. And Arthur's superpower was his smile.
It was at this two-bedroom house in Shirley in June 2020 where Arthur suffered a fatal blow to his head. He died in hospital the next day.
Thomas Hughes took his son Arthur to live with his girlfriend and her 2 children here in Shirley near Solihull during the first national lockdown in March 2020. It was then that the boy's health started to deteriorate. He was subjected to a series of punishments. They included being force-fed salt, made to stay in the hallway for up to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and this took place over a number of weeks. He was deprived of food and water, and he slept on the living room floor.
The court heard how the couple carried out a campaign of cruelty amounting to child torture. Doctors found 130 injuries on Arthur's body. Recordings were played in court of Arthur sounding desperate and distressed. In one recording, he's crying, "No one loves me." And in another, he's crying again, saying, "No one is going to feed me." The couple's text messages helped convict them. 2 days before Arthur died, Hughes sent a message to Tustin saying, "Just gag him or something. Tie some rope round his mouth with a sock in it or something." During the trial, the couple blamed each other for the cruel punishments Arthur was subjected to. They will now face justice for taking the life of a little boy.
Goodness me, I can't even use the words that I want to use to describe those 2 people, the people that you're supposed to protect your children. And I have to say, that story has made me very upset. And how many times do we hear these cases of child cruelty and abuse, and then we find out that things had been reported to the social services and to the police? How many children need to die before these services are fully looked at to make sure that they are operating efficiently and effectively as well, I wonder? And I guess the only point I would like to make as well is, you know, Arthur is not the only child that gets abused. There will be many children now, even now, that are getting abused. And I would call for anyone, I would beg anyone, if you have a child and you are abusing them, and there will be people that are doing this to their children, please don't do that. If you can't bring yourself to love your children and to protect your children, then give someone else the opportunity to love that child, because I promise you, there are so many people. I would adopt a child that was in harm in an instant, and there are so many like me. But I would just say, Arthur, you beautiful little boy, I hope that you rest in peace, I do. Right, I do apologise. I'm a mum as well to a little boy myself, and I found that story very distressing. Anyway, let's have a look at other news headlines today.
Thank you, Michelle. Here are your latest headlines. A former aide to Prince Charles has been found to have played a part in a cash for honours scandal. An independent investigation has revealed that Michael Fawcett coordinated with fixers to offer a knighthood and British citizenship to a donor of the Prince's foundation. He was also involved in directing money from a Saudi billionaire's foundation to another charity, which Charles was patron of. Mr. Fawcett has resigned as the foundation's chief executive. A new COVID antibody treatment has been approved for use in the UK. Clinical trials found Xevudy cut hospital admissions and deaths by 79% in those at risk of developing severe disease. GlaxoSmithKline says it works against the new Omicron variant. And Boris Johnson has received his coronavirus booster vaccination. While getting the jab at London's St Thomas's Hospital, the Prime Minister urged the public to get their top-up vaccine, but reassured everyone to continue as normal within the new measures.
Most important thing is that people should follow the guidance we've set out, and people shouldn't be cancelling things, and there's no need for that at all. That's not in what we're saying. What we're doing is trying to respond in a balanced and a proportionate way to the arrival of the Omicron variant, and we're focusing particularly on transport, on travel. So tough measures for anybody who comes into this country.
Germany is set to introduce tough restrictions for those not vaccinated, and they're considering mandatory vaccines from February. Chancellor Angela Merkel says those who aren't jabbed will be excluded from non-essential shops, cultural and recreational venues. The announcement comes after more than 70,000 newly confirmed infections were reported in the country in the last 24 hours. More than 100 military personnel are being deployed to Aberdeenshire to help people affected by Storm Arwen. The government has confirmed that nearly 20,000 homes are still without power a week after the storm hit the UK. The military will check on the welfare of those struggling without electricity. Power companies say some people may have to wait until Saturday for services to be restored. Russia has made clear that Moscow does not want a new conflict over Ukraine, as the US warned the Kremlin to stay away from the area. Ukraine says Russia has amassed more than 90,000 troops near to their border, while Moscow accuses Kiev of pursuing its own military buildup. The Kremlin warned that the probability of a new conflict in eastern Ukraine remained high, as it's concerned by aggressive rhetoric from Kiev. The US said that the two countries should respect their obligations under the 2014 Minsk peace agreement.
The best way to avert a crisis is through diplomacy. And that's what I look forward to discussing with Sergei. If Russia decides to pursue confrontation, there will be serious consequences.
And the Mail on Sunday has lost its Court of Appeal challenge against the Duchess of Sussex. A warning: the video we're about to show contains flashing images. The appeal win comes after the paper published a personal letter from Meghan Markle to her estranged father. In a statement, she said that the invasion of privacy is a daily fail and that her victory again cements the paper broke the law. I'll be back in half an hour's time. Now let's get back to Dewbs & Co.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. Lots of you are emailing in after that report about little Arthur as well, saying that was just too much to bear. Margaret says, I wish we hadn't shown that video of the cruelty to that little boy. And Margaret, I tell you, I wish we hadn't shown it as well, for the reason that I wish it hadn't happened. But we have a duty to these children that are abused in this way. We can't just turn our eyes and our heads the other way just because it's distressing to us. We must see and show what's going on, because only then will we try and stop things like this and, of course, bring those responsible to justice. Anyway, let's move on with the rest of the programme. Keeping me company here until 7 o'clock, my panel, Charlotte Pickles, the director of the Reform think tank and former advisor to Ian Duncan Smith, Laurie Labourne-Langton, the environmental policy researcher, and Zuby, the man that needs no surname, I noticed, just Zuby, podcaster and rapper. And you know the drill as well on this programme, don't you? It's not just about us and what we think, it's about you and your thoughts. You are central to this show, I can tell you that. Get in touch with me and let me know everything that you're thinking on all the topics tonight and anything else. You can email me gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Now, one of these days, should I say, COVID is not going to come out of my mouth, but today is not that day, unfortunately, because COVID has dominated the headlines again. Oh, I mean, where do we start? So much has been going on, but I shall start with Germany. Why, Michelle, will you start with Germany? We're not in Germany, some of you will be saying. Yes, I know we're not in Germany, we are indeed in the UK, but I have to keep picking up these countries with their frankly bizarre progressions, or regressions, should I say, in most cases, in terms of what they are doing in response to COVID. Because if, again, we tend a blind eye to these things, where does it all stop? And the reason I'm focusing on Germany tonight is because Germany's leaders have agreed to bar unvaccinated people from much of public life in an apparent bid to fend off a fourth wave of COVID-19. Only those who have been vaccinated or recently recovered from COVID will be allowed into restaurants, cinemas, leisure facilities, including things like gyms, and many so-called non-essential shops. And get this, Chancellor Angela Merkel has also said that vaccinations could be made mandatory there by February. Now, it won't surprise regular viewers of this programme to know that my personal view on this is, I almost want to bang my head in despair, but actually I'm quite sad, because the fact that Germany will once again separate its people into those almost deserving of freedoms and those instead to be separated, vilified, you know, to my mind anyway, it's utterly shameful, because I can't help but wonder, did they not learn anything from the past? Zubi, what's your thoughts on all this?
Well, you've said a lot of things that I would say. I think it's absolutely wrong. I think it's immoral, it's unethical, it's a violation of the Nuremberg Code, which came because of the actions of a previous German government. I'm absolutely against this discrimination, this segregation, this trampling of people's civil liberties, as if they have to take this action in order to live their normal lives and to have their rights.
But many of my viewers, Zubi, and I know because I talk about this topic often, will be sitting at home and going, yes, if they don't want to be vaccinated, they should be locked at home.
Why? But see, this is just purely about punishment. That's all it is. It's not about science. It's not about stopping a virus. It's not about any of that. This is just about punishing people who don't want to comply. It doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. We know that these viruses do not stop people from catching the disease. They do not stop transmission.
Charlotte.
And so the notion that locking the unvaccinated out of society somehow is going to curb a wave is illogical. That's simply the excuse for the cruelty.
Charlotte.
I don't think it's about punishment. I mean, clearly, you know, for people who are unvaccinated, their lives are going to be less because they can't do things that they enjoy, people they want to see, etc. I think it's about, firstly, trying to reduce the spread of what is and has been seen to be a deadly virus. And yes, of course, absolutely right, Zubi. You know, many people have got COVID after being double jabbed, but it does, being vaccinated does help reduce to a degree the spread. But the more important thing is that if you are unvaccinated, you are at much greater risk of having a very severe case.
But that's their choice
COVID.
then, isn't it?
So take in the UK. So at the moment, in our intensive care units, those places in a hospital you go when you are at risk of dying, 70% of the people in there who currently have COVID are unvaccinated, 70%. And
Wasn't
if
there
you
some
have your
disputing
ICUs,
about those figures? Because that was in the Sunday Times.
That's the latest NHS figures.
From quite some time ago, aren't they?
The latest figures is from the end of October, so
Right.
a month ago. If you took the whole of hospital, there is a lower proportion, so it's about 40% in the whole of hospital which are unvaccinated. Mm-hmm. But still, that's disproportionate for the percentage that are unvaccinated in this country.
Can I ask how they're defining unvaccinated?
So unvaccinated means you haven't had a COVID vaccine at all.
At all. Okay, because it's different in different countries.
So the double dose will mean you're completely vaccinated here.
And a single dose is unvaccinated?
The problem is that it's not just about, you could say, well, the person chose not to get the vaccine. That's fine, right? I totally agree with you. I think it would be abhorrent to introduce mandatory vaccines. Of course you can't have that as a compulsory thing. But those people who are sitting in ICUs at the moment are risking other people who have non-COVID health emergencies not being able to access the care they need. And in Germany and in other countries in Europe, there is significant pressure at the moment in hospitals. And the repercussion of increasing your risk of ending up in a hospital is that other people might not be able to get the healthcare they need. And I'm sorry, but I think there is a social responsibility, therefore, to get the vaccine so that you're not putting others at risk.
So why are they firing thousands upon thousands of healthcare workers supposedly during a deadly pandemic?
Who's firing healthcare workers?
The UK government.
Well, the UK isn't firing anyone.
Hospitals in the USA.
No, the UK is not firing any healthcare workers. So they delayed the requirement until April.
Well, hang on, because care workers. Hang on a second. Care workers. That
who are not NHS workers.
He didn't say NHS workers. He said health workers.
Yes. So social care workers, which normally aren't deemed as healthcare workers, which is normally the NHS. Social care workers, yes, they did end up firing some. And you know what?
But
My granny's in a care home.
You're picking semantics here because, Charlotte, you know that in the care sector, this mandate has already happened, people have lost their jobs, and you know also that it is indeed coming to the NHS,
which
and they've delayed it
in
to April. And by the way, I think that's a bit of a cheek, because if I was sitting and working in the NHS and I was unvaccinated, and they told me, actually, guess what, you're not going to be able to have your job in April, but if you don't mind, stay and work through winter and get us out of the I can't use the word I want to use. Yeah, get us out of
the winter crisis.
That's better. You're politer than me. Get us out of the stay and get us out of the crisis, please, Dave. And then after that, you can sling your hook.
But by the way, it's okay, Dave, if you
give
COVID to a vulnerable patient that's come in because they've just fallen over and broken their leg and they're 80 years old.
Vaccinated person can do that too.
They can, but there's less of a risk of it.
Well,
and in a care home, so my granny's in a care home, right? The idea that people providing intimate personal care, getting her dressed, helping her go to the toilet, there's no social distancing there. The idea that person should increase the risk of my granny at her age getting COVID.
Would you rather your granny be looked after by no one then, because there's no staff?
I'd rather she was looked after by vaccinated staff. And
How
actually,
about,
one of the things...
And I need to get Laurie in as well, because he's sitting quite...
Bring Laurie in.
Laurie, your thoughts?
Big crises remind us that we're all dependent on each other in society, right? Crises like COVID, crises like the Second World War. And when those crises come upon us, we all have to remember those responsibilities that we hold in relation to other people, right? When it comes to the vaccine...
And do you think we're in a crisis now?
I think we've been in a crisis for a long time. I think we've not got on top of this properly yet. We've got on top of, say, the flu. Often every year we get on top of the flu, right? There have been some years where we've not been able to...
because of the flu, though, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. But we've developed a regime in this country and other countries where we can manage it more effectively, right? There have been some years where that regime hasn't been so effective, like in the mid-2010s, when a lot of people died and it caused a lot of stress to the National Health Service. We haven't got on top of this one yet. We haven't developed a way to properly manage this virus, partly because we've got variants coming along that change the game, right?
So what do you think to this lockdown then in Germany of the unvaccinated?
I think that that's a very difficult decision that the German government has made. I'm not going to come on here necessarily and defend it. I think that, as Charlotte was saying, countries in Europe in particular are experiencing serious stress, and they've got even...
What do you think of mandatory vaccines?
I think that in, say, the care sector, people who are caring for vulnerable patients, they should want to have a vaccine. I think the vast, overwhelming majority of those people will be doing that because they understand that that's a key part of providing care.
But no, I mean mandatory vaccines. So if you look at Germany, for example, and already there's other countries, Austria, Greece, for example, don't even get me started on Greece, by the way, who not only are they enforcing mandatory vaccines, they're fining people.
Yeah, and I have family in Greece who find these things very difficult. They find it partly difficult because there's so much mistrust in government now and in institutions. And I think that this has been going on for an even longer amount of time. And really, when we come on here and we talk about a lot of these issues, really we need to go back to the root cause of this. Was a lot of mistrust in government. In the UK, I think we're in a better position than some other countries because there's more trust, particularly in things like vaccines. And that's a very positive thing because people recognise that it's not just what you're doing to yourself, it's what you're doing to other people.
But Charlotte, let me ask you about mandatory vaccines. So I'm not talking about care workers or a specific profession. I'm talking about a mass population, a mandatory compulsory vaccination. So in places that you see in like Austria, your Greece, your Germany are going to be voting on it. And the reason that I raise it here is because when things happen, sometimes you will find them happening here too, which is why it is my concern. What's your view on that? Do you think you should be able to say to an entire population, you must have this vaccine?
Absolutely not.
Good.
No. I think it's a choice. It's a personal choice. I agree on the if you're going to be working with very vulnerable people, go and find another job if you don't want to get the vaccine.
What if you've already had COVID?
But we know that the protection you get from having COVID is actually slightly lower than if you had the vaccine.
That's not correct.
It is.
No,
it is. There has been recent science that
I would say
that's
disputed, Charlotte.
There is evidence that shows that the
there's over 100 studies showing the opposite.
Having the vaccine is slightly higher. No. But even so, you have waning we know this, right? The science is telling us there is waning protection. So, OK, you've had COVID last year in 2020.
Natural immunity lasts longer
and
is more.
And then you come a year on, 2 years on, right? And
Yes.
so what? That's fine then. We say
there's people who had SARS.
No.
There's people who had SARS 15 plus years ago who have immunity to COVID.
Right, let me ask you all this then, because to bring it back to the UK, because I know people will begin, oh, Michelle, shut up talking about Austria and Germany and wherever else. Talk about the UK, so I'll talk about the UK then. So the government has signed a deal to buy 114 million more doses of Pfizer and Moderna vaccines to use in 2022 and 2023. Now, let me, and I'll throw this out to the panel. This vaccine programme was supposed to be, and I'll keep this brief because I'm conscious of time, supposed to be, let's get the vulnerable vaccinated. Then it was all adults. Then it was you all need 2. Then it was now we need to go down to the teenagers. Then it was down to the children. Now it's up to 3 vaccines. Then it's the children need 2 vaccines. And here we are now buying millions more of these doses. When is this going to stop, Laurie?
It stops when we develop an effective regime to manage it. Now, by that I mean that, let's take the flu again. That is a virus that's exceedingly well understood, that has been around for a very long time, and in which we have very sophisticated ability to develop vaccines for the most vulnerable segments of the population.
Vaccine after vaccine after vaccine if the government told you to for COVID?
If I'm in a vulnerable we will hopefully get to the position soon, in the not too distant future, where it's similar to the kind of way we manage flu, where particularly vulnerable people have that vaccine, right? You're going to take, when you get to a certain age, you're going to take your flu vaccine, right? And if you're not taking it, you're going to be more at risk.
Charlotte, would you keep taking these over and over and over and over again? Because I'm presuming that's what we're going to have to do if you're buying 114 million more of these things.
I mean, So would I, if I had to, and it was going to protect me? Yes, I would. Yeah. But actually, I'm very much in agreement that as we see this virus evolve, on the whole, viruses, when they don't want to kill you, right, because they want to spread. So they tend to evolve, get milder, which is why I think we have to learn to live with it. We absolutely cannot have another lockdown of any description, because the trade-offs, the non-COVID impacts on people are far too devastating.
Zubi,
so we have to learn to live with it.
Would you keep taking these vaccines over and over and over and over again?
No.
In a word, no.
The notion that people should have to inject themselves multiple times a year, perfectly healthy people with anything, is unheard of.
So would you stop the flu vaccine? Would you suggest that elderly people don't take the flu vaccine?
Look, I'm pro-vaccine choice. I'm pro-medical choice. If someone wants to take a shot as many times as they want, whether or not I think it's sane, it's up to them. But even with the flu, that's an annual shot, right? That's not a 3-4 time a year.
Which is what we would have to get to, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think if this government actually wants to continue deploying these vaccines over and over and over and over again, and actually want us to keep taking them over and over and over again, I think they need to step up and start answering some questions, because there'll be many people, and some of you will be watching, who are absolutely happy to keep having vaccine after vaccine if that's what the government suggests that you should do. And that's fine, that's great, that's your choice, keep going. There'll be others, myself included, that are getting to the point now where you just think, hang on a second, you need to start selling this a little bit better to me, because, you know, COVID, it does have a very, very high survival rate, that is for sure, particularly if you are not with comorbidities or if you are much younger and those kind of things. So I would want to have information about why it's essential. I would want to understand what is this government doing to protect people, however few the number is irrelevant, but what are you doing to protect people that have side effects, damaging side effects from these vaccines? Where is your plan to help these people? Because as I understand it, the manufacturers are quite protected from people suing them. And I would also want to know things like, what about natural immunity? I would want to understand from the JCVI, how come all of a sudden it seems so safe to keep giving these children, these 12 to 15-year-olds, for example, multiple vaccines on health grounds, when just a couple of months ago, it wasn't even recommended for a mass rollout purely on health grounds. So for me personally, I have a lot of questions that I want answering. If you disagree with me and you're absolutely happy with the way that things are, that is indeed you're right. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about protesting. What do you reckon? Do you think you should be able to be sent to prison just for protesting? A method using locking on, which can be quite disruptive. What do you think to that? We'll have that story and more after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Wet weather moving in overnight, and that's going to hang around across parts of the south for a time on Friday, so a dull, damp day for some here tomorrow, but further north we should see some brighter skies returning. The wet weather tonight is coming from this tangle of weather fronts tied into a low pressure that's well to the north, so these weather fronts are not particularly active, but they will be bringing some damp weather already across Northern Ireland into western Scotland. Hitting the colder air, there could for a time be a bit of snow across parts of Scotland and even further south through the early hours over parts of northern England, maybe even as far south as the Midlands. A little bit of snow is possible before it turns back to rain. It's turning back to rain because milder air is arriving, so although it's pretty cold out there this evening, temperatures will actually rise through the night. So, although again, still perhaps a little bit of snow across East Anglia in the southeast early on in the morning, it will quickly turn back to rain. And a dull, damp morning for East Anglia and the southeast. Turning a bit drier for a time across the south, but then more rain coming into the southwest later on. Meanwhile, much of northern Britain dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine for northern England, Northern Ireland, most of Scotland. There will be some showers in the west. A milder day, particularly in the south, where double digits are likely. During Friday afternoon, though, that wet weather returns to the southwest and spreads further north into parts of South Wales, maybe as far north as the Midlands. Certainly a wet evening on Friday across the south coast. That rain scoots away, and then we're looking at showers coming in more widely during the weekend. So Saturday is going to be a showery day, a colder day again as the winds pick up from the northwest. Quite a stiff and chilly wind blowing then through Saturday. The showers will mostly be of rain, but some snow is likely over the hills of southern Scotland and northern England. And quite a wet day across parts of eastern England, but some sunshine for central Scotland and parts of the southeast staying dry, but it will be colder again. Colder again on Sunday as well, but a dry day for most. Just a few showers keeping going across eastern England.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. I'm just reading some of your emails. Ian has said, if Michelle had been in charge of the country's response to COVID, we'd have all our freedoms for sure, but we'd probably all be dead. Oh, thanks, Ian. Thank you. But that's the very nature of this programme. We're all entitled to our opinions. You know, I completely respect that many of my viewers have a completely different view to me, and that is all right. And I tell you what, I wish that more people could be like that, because we should all be able to respectfully disagree. That's what makes life interesting, if you ask me. Anyway, let's move on to a different topic. Home Secretary Priti Patel is pushing ahead with controversial new laws that could jail protesters for up to 6 months. This would be an amendment to the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill, and it would give police the power to force these prison terms, as I say, up to 6 months for activists who lock or chain or glue themselves to railings or anything else, quite frankly. Got to say, this has divided opinion, to put it mildly. I've never been on a protest, I've got to say. Never been my kind of thing. I think I might go on a protest if they try and lock us down again, but I've never done it. And if I did, I'm not sure I would appreciate being put in prison for my efforts. But as someone that has been affected by protests, particularly these Insulate Britain recent ones, then I'm all in favour of imprisoning someone else for disrupting me. So I accept I am quite a hypocrite. What's your thoughts?
This bill, right, isn't just about cracking down on that particular type of protest, right? And it won't just affect those particular protesters. This is a bill that goes far beyond people sitting in on the N25 and causing protests in that way, right? There's a whole set of measures in there that could have very negative impacts on our freedom of speech in this country, right? Protest has given us the right to vote. It's helped cut down on discrimination to women, to gay people, say. It's given us the weekend, right? The right to have time off at the weekend. There's got to be some limits there, right? Sure, but what are those limits, right? What are the proportionate ways to have those limits? This bill, in say, making it a potential criminal offence to cause serious annoyance with a time in prison of up to 10 years, that for me is pretty wild. That's a way of cracking down our ability to have protests and to hold governments to account. And the government's got, previous on this front. They seem to want to try and limit our ability to try and hold certain parts of government policy to account. And this is something that's not got enough media attention, this bill.
Well, welcome to GBNews. Thank goodness for us.
And very good to see. And, people need to learn more about this. They need to check out the Kill the Bill campaign. There's a protest in front of Parliament on the 8th of December at 5 o'clock. I would urge people to go along and use their democratic right to protest to try and stop this bill from happening.
I can't go, unfortunately. I'll be here preparing for Dewbs and Co. But just before I hand over to you, to Zubi or Charlotte, I am interested in your view, though, where there has to be some limits. If I'm thinking back to Insulate Britain, quite frankly, I thought what they were doing was just outrageous.
I mean, look, there are better and there are less effective tactics when you're protesting, right? And lots of people who are, say, environmentalists have called out Insulate Britain for what they've done. Now, others have said the risks of not insulating Britain's housing stock properly and dealing with the climate crisis are pretty high, so it could be a proportionate measure, right? But we should differentiate between tactics that we don't actually quite like and how many people they impact. And if you take the actual number of people who are impacted by those protests, sure, it was very annoying for the people who were directly there and it caused some knock-on effects around the rest of the country, right? But is it something that can be used by governments? We're all annoyed at that stuff. Do we want the government to exploit our annoyance, that one thing, to change the law to cut down on our wider right to
Well, what
protest?
I would have wanted on that particular issue was for the media, or certain parts of the media, to stop focusing on them and giving them the oxygen, because when I heard some of the heads of that group interviewed, what they were saying is, we're doing this method and this way because it gets the media attention. Well, I would have cut the media attention off, and that might have made them think twice about their methods. But Charlotte, what's your view?
I'm very sympathetic to the position that we live in a free country, and, one of the great things about democracy is you can go out and you can protest and you can disagree and you can get your voice heard, and that freedom of expression and freedom of assembly is absolutely crucial to living in a free country. However, people have really picked up on this issue around the kind of serious annoyance in the bill, and it does make it sound very, very wide. But there is a legal definition of nuisance, which is essentially what the serious annoyance is. And actually, it was the Law Commission, a load of eminent legal brains, who said that idea of nuisance should be put into statute.
What is that
should
definition?
Be a criminal.
I don't know what it is.
It's long-winded. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to attempt to get it word for word right. But effectively, it's causing damage to an individual or an individual. an individual, their property, or their ability to essentially go about their lives. I mean, I've just put that in an incredibly unlegalistic way, and others, I'm sure, you probably got people already telling me that it's not quite right. But broadly speaking, that's what it is. And I think that's where it gets interesting, because actually it might be a small number of people who got disrupted on the M25 or the other roads, but if it was someone, for example, who couldn't get to a hospital appointment. And I know that's always the emotive thing that's used, but actually that's pretty serious. And more than that, people who can't get to their jobs and people who can't go about their daily lives. So I'm all for protest. I'm all for being able to go out and get your voice heard, but I don't think it should be at the cost of core kind of critical infrastructure being disturbed. And that's what we saw. But I agree with you, the risks in the bill of it being overzealously applied by police, I think is a problem. And the idea that you would go for a 10-year sentence is absurd, given what we give to serious offenders. I think that's ridiculous.
Zubi?
Yeah, I echo what Laurie and Charlotte both said there. So something I'm always concerned about, as you can probably tell, is governmental overreach, right? In a democratic country, in a country that is supposed to have liberalism, you have a right to freedom of speech. I'm an absolute advocate for that. You have a right to protest. Even if it doesn't matter if I totally disagree with what you're protesting, you absolutely have a right to protest, and I will support your right to protest. However, of course, there are always lines. You don't have a right to violently assault someone, to destroy property, cause vandalism, so on and so forth. I don't believe you have a right to just block an entire public highway. So there are forms of protesting and having your voice heard that absolutely, regardless of the cause, fall within the lines. I agree that people need to be careful to not take perhaps a particular cause or a set of protesters that they personally don't like or have some animosity towards.
What, you mean me? Are you saying me? I can't just take all these insulate Britain morons and put them in prison.
I wasn't actually in the country during this thing. I just heard about it. But what I'm saying is you need to make sure, I haven't looked at all the details of the bill, so I can't speak so specifically about it. But I think people need to be careful that the line is where it comes to actual damage towards other people. And I think anything needs to be specific. Yeah. It can't just be something broad where the ability to interpret it by law enforcement is just very, very wide, because then you're creeping into dangerous territory of protest itself being infringed upon.
Yeah, like the thing to remember here is that the ability to police stuff that's really damaging, right, to society has always been there, right?
Yes.
The Interstate Britain people aren't the first people to go, hang on a minute, we could sit in the road and cause lots of disruption. This stuff has always been happening, right? And there's always been the police powers to crack down on this stuff. What's happening here is the government is exploiting people's frustration and the way that these stories are spun to push even further than we have to have, right?
That's like saying with anything, or things have happened in the past, so why do we need to change anything? Like maybe actually there's a recognition that protesting in that way is actually getting bigger, or more people are doing it, or it's lasting longer. So I don't think that in itself should be a reason not to take further action. And actually, if you think about it, so I think the Met Police said it cost £2 million in less than a month just to police those Insulate Britain protests. £2 million of police money. Now, I don't know about viewers, but I can guess there's a decent chunk of them that would say that's not a great use of police money at a time when we've got kids stabbing each other on the street. So I think there is something about saying maybe the fact that at the moment you can only fine someone £1,000 for blocking a motorway is not a sufficient deterrent if you've got a whole kind of organisation behind you, and maybe putting someone in prison for a short period of time, and I think we could debate whether 6 months is too long as well. It might be a deterrent.
It cost the disruption to society of winning votes for women and of winning the right to have a weekend, that they were significant.
Of course.
And at the time, people would have said it wasn't enough.
Well, there you go. Have we solved it? What do you reckon? I've admitted right at the start, and I'll admit at the end as well, I am a massive hypocrite, because if I was protesting something I was passionate about, I wouldn't want to be in prison. But when people have annoyed me with theirs, I want them to be there. So I do accept I'm hypocritical on that. You lot are getting in touch, lots of you still getting in touch about the first topic, the whole vaccination setup. Scott says, if I was in care, I'd rather be looked after by someone with a negative test than an untested, vaccinated person. Arthur Lee said, Michelle, just go and take the vaccine. What is your problem? You bore us with this topic day in and day out. Well, you don't know whether or not I've had my vaccine because I don't share such information. And what I bore you with day in and day out is I resist entirely this whole kind of mandate, this whole separation, because I think we have to stand up to that. I really do. And by the way, when I go on, and I do go on about it a lot, I accept that I want the government to put something in place for anyone that gets side effects. If you are unlucky enough to get a side effect from a vaccine, however small that risk is, you'll be thanking me for going on about it, I can tell you. On the protesters, this has divided your opinions. For sure, Gary has been in contact saying they're not protesting, many of these people, they are obstructing, and that is two different things entirely. John says protesting should not be a prisonable offence unless it causes disruption to the public. But John, like Laurie was trying to make the point, who decides where those lines are? And I guess it is an interesting topic, and we'd all probably, wouldn't we, have different lines depending on what the topic was and what our thoughts was on the topic, if we're quite honest, I guess. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the tabloid media. Why? Well, because Meghan Markle won a case today, and she described tabloid practices basically as a daily fail that divides us. Is she right?
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, what do you think about the media? Often it gets a little bit of a bad reputation, doesn't it? But the media is, of course, a broad church. But the one I want to focus on, or the part I want to focus on right now, is the tabloid side of it, because the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, says a precedent has been set after the publisher of the Mail on Sunday was denied its request for a trial over claims it breached her copyright and privacy. Of course, if you followed this story, you'll know what it's about, but it's basically, it followed the publication of bits of a letter written to Meghan by her father. Anyway, at the end of all this, she's called the tabloid media industry a daily fail that divides us. She's called for an overhaul, she says, of tabloid practices. Charlotte, what's your view on the tabloid media? Do you think they're a help? Do you think they're a hindrance?
I find that quote quite odd, to be honest. So a daily fail on privacy, daily may be a bit much, but certainly I think you could point to quite a lot of occasions where privacy has not been protected. I mean, you know, let's not go into phone hacking, but there's been all sorts of things where you could point to. But divides us? I'm not quite sure what she's trying to say there. Is it that because, you know, often tabloids have a particular leaning that she feels that's unhelpful? But actually, if you look at social media, you look at where a lot of people get their kind of commentary from now, that's far more divisive than I think the tabloid. So, again, I sort of go back to the discussion around protests. You know, we live in a free country where we have free speech and free, you know, a free press. I think tabloids are, you know, for many people, serve a pretty good function. But the privacy point, I think she's got something on.
What's your view, Laurie? I mean, because the tabloid press, they do get a bit of a kicking, and I've got to say, I bet there was an awful lot of people that breathed a sigh of relief when, for example, the News of the World, remember the News of the World? When that disappeared, I bet there was a lot of people in the public eye that was a bit, whew, thank goodness for that. But it does get a bad rep, doesn't it, tabloid press? Is it fair?
I think that there are a number of practices that some of those newspapers have engaged in and probably still engage in now that have been pretty grim, like hacking the phones of people, of, you know, slandering others, of calling public servants enemies of the people, using disproportionate language like that. I think they can have, in the past, have been very divisive. I have kind of personal experience of that. The people I grew up with have often had to, at times, go on to benefits to get social security. No fault of their own, they just have hard times in their lives. They come from low-income communities. And that was happening at a time where some of the tabloid press were taking very extreme, you know, outrider examples about people who were maybe exploiting benefits and make it seem like that's what everyone was doing. And at one point, most people thought about a quarter of the entire benefits budget, right, was being defrauded, was being fraudulently claimed, when it was actually 0.7%. And my mates from home, it was it was even more tough than it would usually be of going on benefits to feel like you're in a society where it's divided between so-called strikers and shirkers. And I think that they absolutely played into that division that was going on there.
Yeah, Zubi, I've got to say, loads of people are critical of the tabloid press, but then at the same time can't help themselves but buy it and click on it and indulge themselves with the content, in my view. So what's your thoughts on this?
I think it goes beyond tabloids, to be honest. I think the legacy corporate media in general, and all media, as you mentioned, social media, it can be extraordinarily divisive. We know this, and we can actually look at historical examples and extreme examples of them really fomenting hostility within a population. And I think that there can be a lack of balance. And I'm generally just a fan of decency. Right? I'm generally a fan of decency, and I'm a big fan of honesty. And I understand that if you're trying to sell papers or get people to tune in, sometimes you sensationalize a headline a little bit. But there's a difference between a slightly sensationalized headline and something that's deliberately misleading, or which is directly fomenting a certain feeling of anger or outrage towards a certain part of the population and things like that. And I think that's what needs to be called out because it's unethical. And I think that the media plays a really important role, both in reflecting what is going on in a society, but we have to be honest, it also shapes and forms people's beliefs and opinions. You just gave a fantastic example of how much they can skew that. To give a great example, I don't want to go back to COVID, but for example, due to the way that the US media fearmongered about it, you have about 50% plus of left-leaning Americans, for example, believing that if you catch COVID, the hospitalization rate is over 20%. The real number is closer to 1%, but that is how much they've been led to fear this particular cause. So the reality versus what people believe can truly be shaped by the media, and that goes across all different issues.
You guys, I mean, you're getting in contact with this, and I think tabloid media is something that divides people, doesn't it? And I always think it's a bit like the whole Amazon conversation, if you bear with my analogy. People will lament the kind of death of the high street while simultaneously buying every single thing that they need from Amazon. And I think that's a little bit the same with this kind of conversation. Lots of people will criticise the tabloid media whilst constantly clicking on everything and buying it. And there's a reason why at least one of the tabloids nowadays. It's probably the biggest selling newspaper, or at least close to, in this country. Have I got time? What time is it? I've got a very quick question to ask you. I was going to make it a whole story. I was going to play you loads of stuff. And the reason why is there's been an advert that's campaigning for road safety, basically, that wants, it features a driver and a cyclist basically making up after almost colliding. Let me just show it, a little bit of it for you.
The mirror! Could you not see me cycling?
This isn't me. Look at me. I'm trembling.
You really scared me.
I could have killed you. How would I live with myself? Wait, I really gave you a fright, didn't I?
That must have really frightened you.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Anyway, that it makes me chuckle because if you've ever seen me driving, goodness me, I get a little touch of the road rage. I do. Anyway, that ad has basically been pulled whilst complaints are investigated because the car basically cut across. A cyclist was upset, and people are basically saying it's victim blaming, and the cyclist is getting into trouble for something or depicted badly for something it didn't do. Charlotte, there's a whole kind of debate often on the roads, isn't there, about cyclists and cars and who should have precedent and who shouldn't. So I'm just going to make this really simple, and people are going to say, why are you taking it off topic? But I don't care. I can take it off topic. It's my show. My question is, do you think cyclists should pay road tax?
Yes.
Do you, Zubi?
No.
Cyclists, you don't?
I don't think anybody should.
That's fair. That's a very fair point. Laurie, you don't think that they should? What do you think? Do you think cyclists should pay road tax? I know, quite frankly, that advert had nothing to do with road tax, but it did make me think about road tax because I cycle and I drive, and we've all got to share the roads. However, there is only one side of the road users that pay the tax that would, I don't know, might go for example, of fixing potholes or whatever it is. And it's only the car drivers. And I often wonder, why is that fair? If we all have to share the road, why is only a percentage of the road users paying tax? I might have that debate in depth another time. I can tell you. Go on then, quickly, as long as it's very quick.
The costs imposed on society driving a car are way more than cycling. There's air pollution, there's CO2 emissions, there's fatalities, there's the fact they use up more space, all these kind of things.
Also, damage to roads comes from cars rather than... But you know, cyclists, my experience in London is cyclists can be just as dangerous.
Right, you don't agree with me. Cars. That's it. They can get out. Get out, all of you. That's all I've got time for. Charlotte, Zubi, Laurie, thank you very much for your company. Thank you for yours. And if you agree with me about cyclists and road tax, get in touch and let me know. GBViews at gbnews.uk. I'm determined to find someone that agrees with me. I'll see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock. You have yourselves a very good evening in the meantime.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Wet weather moving in overnight, and that's going to hang around across parts of the south for a time on Friday, so a dull, damp day for some here tomorrow, but further north, we should see some brighter skies returning. The wet weather tonight is coming from this tangle of weather fronts tied into a low pressure that's well to the north. So these weather fronts are not particularly active, but they will be bringing some damp weather already across Northern Ireland into western Scotland. Hitting the colder air, there could for a time be a bit of snow across parts of Scotland, and even further south through the early hours over parts of northern England, maybe even as far south as the Midlands. A little bit of snow is possible before it turns back to rain. It's turning back to rain because milder air is arriving. So although it's pretty cold out there this evening, temperatures will actually rise through the night. So although, again, still perhaps a little bit of snow across East Anglia in the southeast early on in the morning, it will quickly turn back to rain. And a dull, damp morning for East Anglia and the southeast. Turning a bit drier for a time across the south, but then more rain coming into the southwest later on. Meanwhile, much of northern Britain dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine for northern England, Northern Ireland, most of Scotland. There will be some showers in the west. A milder day, particularly in the south, where double digits are likely. During Friday afternoon, though, that wet weather returns to the southwest and spreads further north into parts of South Wales, maybe as far north as the Midlands. Certainly a wet evening on Friday across the south coast. That rain scoots away. And then we're looking at showers coming in more widely during the weekend. So Saturday is going to be a showery day, a colder day again as the winds pick up from the northwest. Quite a stiff and chilly wind blowing then through Saturday. The showers will mostly be of rain, but some snow is likely over the hills of southern Scotland and northern England. And quite a wet day across parts of eastern England, but some sunshine for central Scotland and parts of the southeast staying dry, but it will be colder again. Colder again on Sunday as well, but a dry day for most. Just a few showers keeping going across eastern England.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up